You're not yelling anymore. You're not crying in the middle of the night. You're not trying to explain, and you've stopped needing to be understood. You've just gone quiet. But it's not the kind of silence meant to test them or to see if they still care. It's the kind that comes when someone has simply had enough. And the moment you stop caring, that's when they start to lose it. To a narcissist, you were never someone to love. You were a source of emotional reaction, a mirror to reflect their inflated ego. If you got angry, if you begged, if you broke down, they still had control. But now, you don't react. You're not angry, you're not sad, you're just done, and you're no longer giving them anything to feed off of. And that's when they come back, but not because they love you. They come back to regain control. This video isn't a story time. It's a warning, because I'm going to walk you through 8 of the darkest, most manipulative things a narcissist will do when they realize you genuinely don't care anymore. You've come this far. Don't let one familiar tactic pull you right back into the pit you barely crawled out of. Watch this until the end, because this time you deserve your freedom for real. 1. They target your love using the very same tactic that once made you believe they were the one. Do you remember how it began? They didn't show up like a manipulator. They weren't loud. They didn't push or demand. They showed up like a dream, like someone who just got you. Someone who said exactly what you needed to hear, exactly when you needed to hear it. You thought, I must be lucky. You wondered how anyone could feel so familiar so fast. And before you even had time to question it, you gave them your heart. They remember that version of you, the one who believed in them. And when you finally went quiet, when you stepped away, when you stopped feeding the cycle, they didn't come up with something new. They just went back to the beginning, that version of the story where you fell for them hard. It starts small, a message like, I passed by the cafe where we first met today. I couldn't stop thinking about you. A song you both used to play. An old photo accidentally resurfacing. A carefully worded regret. I wasn't ready for someone like you. I wish I could go back and do it differently. And if you love them deeply, you'll feel something. Not because you still want them, but because that version of you, the one who believed, still remembers. The love was real, and they know that. They know that even though you left, a part of you still aches with unanswered questions. That's why they don't need a new plan. They just reopen the exact chapter that once convinced you this was love, and now they use it as a weapon. They don't miss the cafe. They didn't stumble across that song. They aren't reaching out because they finally see your worth. They're doing it because they remember that worked before. They're not trying to reconnect. They're trying to test your lock, to see if the door you closed is still holding. And if you respond even a polite hope you're well, even a like, even the slightest opening, they slip back in like nothing ever happened. No apology, no accountability, just a continuation of the same old pattern. Build that love you once gave freely. They're now using it to pull you back into the story you fought so hard to escape. But here's the truth. Someone who truly loves you doesn't reopen wounds with nostalgia. They don't bring up shared memories just to drag you back into pain. Only someone who doesn't love you, but is addicted to being loved by you, would turn your heart into a tool of control. 2. They fake vulnerability to trigger your empathy. In the last part, you saw them try to hook you by bringing back the very memories that once made you fall. But when that doesn't work, when your heart remembers but your body doesn't move, they shift gears. From lover to victim. Gone is the charming, confident version of them. Now their voice softens, their tone turns vulnerable, and they start talking about one thing. Pain. I've been falling apart lately. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I've never felt this alone. They don't yell, they don't accuse, they just sound tired, like someone barely hanging on. And what they're counting on is that you're still you. That deep down, beneath the boundaries you've tried to build, there's still a part of you that can't turn away from someone in pain. They're not hoping you believe them, they're hoping you feel responsible, because they know You're not heartless. You're not cold. You're someone who once loved them with your whole soul. That's what makes this tactic so dangerous. Not because their pain is real, but because your empathy is. They'll talk about depression, trauma, being broken, losing everyone. They'll paint themselves as completely alone, and you as the one person who ever really understood them. You were the only one who ever saw me for who I am. If you walk away now, there's nothing left for me. And at first, it sounds heartbreaking, maybe even genuine. But if you listen closely, there's always a shift, and a turn in the tone, subtle but clear. I didn't think you'd give up on me like everyone else. You're just like the others. I thought you were different. Did you catch that? As the story changes, it stops being about their pain and starts becoming a guilt trip. You're not just someone who left. You're now being painted as the person who caused their collapse. They don't want your understanding. They want your guilt. Because if you feel guilty, the door opens again. Not because you trust them, but because you start doubting yourself. And that's when you begin asking the wrong questions. Maybe I was too harsh. What if they really are falling apart and I just made it worse? Am I being too cold? But here's the truth, no matter how much it stings, people who are genuinely hurting don't manipulate your empathy. They don't turn their pain into a performance. They don't twist your kindness into an entry point. When a narcissist realizes they can't make you love them again, they'll try to make you feel guilty for not loving them anymore. And when love doesn't work, they'll come back with tears. But those tears aren't for healing. They're to pull you back into the loop by weaponizing the one thing that once made you stay, your heart. 3. Disappearing completely, then coming back as if nothing ever happened. After pretending to be vulnerable no longer works, after you stop responding out of pity and even the emotional memories fail to pull you back, they switch tactics. Not with more emotion, but with absence. And this is where they play their most dangerous move, the quiet retreat. To see if you will chase. When everything else fails, they go silent. No more messages, no likes on your posts, no signs of their presence, no birthday wishes, no sad declarations, not even a drop of fake remorse. And if you don't fully understand how a narcissist operates, you might think maybe they've finally let go. But in truth, this isn't the end. It's a calculated step back, like a chess player pulling a piece away, to bait you into lowering your guard. They know, once their presence disappears, you'll start to feel the void. And if your foundation isn't solid enough yet, you'll begin to question, was I too harsh? Are they really gone? Maybe I overreacted. That's the moment your boundaries begin to loosen, not with words, but in your mind. And when they sense that the time is right, they return. But not with explanations, not with apologies, not with any real accountability. They come back as if nothing ever happened, as if everything between you and them was just a small pause in an otherwise ongoing relationship. A casual message. Remember this song? Hey, it's your birthday today. I just came across an old photo of us. It sounds harmless, simple, but it's a test, a quiet probe to see if the door you closed is still locked. They're not returning to repair anything. They're here to check, are you still available, without them taking responsibility for what they did. And if you respond, even just an emoji, a short reply, the tiniest opening, that's all they need. They know the door isn't truly closed. From there, they'll begin to ease back in, but not as a new person, as the same version you walked away from, just in a more polite disguise. They'll behave like nothing serious ever happened, as if your words before you left didn't mean much, as if you overreacted and they just needed a little space. The softer you are, the more they press in. And if you're not fully grounded, you'll find yourself trying to act normal just to avoid conflict, even though you were the one who was hurt. 4. They play the changed version to win you back. When the old emotional tricks stop working, when you no longer react to nostalgic messages or sudden breakdowns, when you no longer cry over memories or soften at their tears, they realize their usual tactics have lost their grip. So they switch gears, and this time They show up as someone new, or rather someone pretending to be new. They start posting about healing books, meditation, mindfulness. They talk about spiritual growth, emotional awakening, and how losing you opened their eyes. They'll tell you they've been reading Eckhart Tolle. They'll mention journaling, trauma recovery, inner child work. They'll say things you once begged them to understand. I see now how I hurt you. It was never your fault. I'm learning to love from a place of wholeness, not fear. I'm finally facing the parts of me I used to avoid. Sounds perfect, doesn't it? Almost like a dream version of them, the one you always wished they could become. But here's the truth. You've changed for real. They're only changing the surface. Because if you look closely, you'll see everything they say stays in the words. Their behavior hasn't shifted. They still expect forgiveness without accountability. They still avoid hard conversations. They just wear the costume of someone who's done the work. They're not evolving. They're marketing a version of themselves that might appeal to the version of you who has outgrown them. Because they know you're no longer attracted to the chaos. You're drawn to peace, clarity, growth. So now they speak the language of healing, not to love you better, but to convince you they're worthy of a second chance. But here's the thing. People who have truly changed don't need to perform their growth. They don't have to convince you with rehearsed wisdom. You feel it. You sense it. Their actions speak louder than their philosophies. A genuinely healed person doesn't chase you down to prove they've changed. They respect your boundaries. They don't demand re-entry. They accept that growth sometimes means letting go. A person who's truly awake understands this. If they once hurt you, the most loving thing they can do might be to leave you in peace. But the narcissist isn't doing this for healing. They're doing it because they can't stand that you moved on. They can't tolerate losing the role they once held in your life. So they reinvent themselves just enough to get back in. Not enough to be different, just enough to seem different. They might be less explosive, less obviously controlling, but the deeper motive hasn't changed. To regain access to a place in your life they used to occupy without question. You're not cold for being skeptical. You're not closed off for not buying the new performance. You're doing what your old self didn't. Observing, waiting, thinking clearly. And if something feels off, it probably is, because people who have truly changed don't use their growth to win you back. They use it to make sure they never hurt someone like you again. 5. They turn your silence into a smear campaign behind your back. Your silence isn't revenge. It's closure. A quiet, final boundary. No drama, no explanation, no chaos. But to a narcissist, silence is intolerable. Because when you say nothing, they lose control of the narrative. And when they can't control the narrative, they rewrite it in a way that benefits them. That's when the smear campaign begins. Not through direct accusations, not through public rage, but through whispers, subtle hints, and the construction of a poor me victim persona. They'll start reaching out to mutual friends, acquaintances, co-workers, anyone still orbiting your life. And they won't attack you outright. No, they'll be more calculated. I really tried my best, but she was always so cold. I don't know what happened. He just became so distant. I don't want to speak badly of anyone, but there are things you don't know about them. It sounds soft, it sounds harmless, but what they're planting is doubt. They don't need to prove you were awful. They just need others to stop being sure you're trustworthy. Their story usually follows a formula. They were the devoted partner. Something suddenly changed. And they were just the unfortunate victim of your inexplicable coldness. The more silent you are, the fewer chances you have to respond. And they exploit that silence to control the entire narrative. The further you step back, the more space they have to construct a version of you that works in their favor. No one hears the real story because the only voice speaking is theirs. And here's the brutal part. Sometimes the ones listening are people who once supported you. People who saw your pain firsthand, but now start to wonder. What if they're telling the truth? What if there's something I missed? That's when isolation creeps in. You lose a relationship. You start losing the connections around it, all because of a story you didn't get to tell. And the worst part? They do all of this with a calm, virtuous face. No yelling, no cursing, just a deeply wounded soul trying to move on. Meanwhile, you stay silent. And that silence, they use it as confirmation. See, they're not even denying it. If they weren't guilty, why aren't they saying anything? This is the trap so many fall into, feeling forced to explain, defend, or prove. I'm not who they say I am. Stop. You don't need to do that. Because the people who are truly mature, they know how to recognize who stays quiet to protect their peace, and who speaks just a little too much to cover something up. 6. They replace you quickly, not because they've healed, but to prove they're still worth something. One day, you see them posting photos with someone new. It might be someone from your old circle, a complete stranger, or worse, someone they once told you was just a friend. The smile is the same. The sweet words are recycled, but now they're meant for someone else. And in that moment your heart clenches, not because you still love them, but because a voice creeps in. Was I the problem? Let me say this clearly. No, you were not the problem. The speed at which they replaced you isn't a sign of healing. It's a sign of how unbearable their emptiness truly is. A narcissist cannot sit with silence. They cannot survive emotional stillness. And they definitely cannot handle being without someone to reflect their ego back at them. Your silence cut off their supply. Your lack of response stripped away their control. So, to regain the feeling of power, they rush to replace you. They don't love the new person. They use the new person as a prop, as a live demonstration for both you and the world that says, I didn't fail. I wasn't abandoned. I'm still desirable, still worthy, still wanted. But if you look closely, something feels off. Everything is too fast. The words sound familiar. The affection feels scripted, like they're rerunning an old play. The truth is, they're not building a new relationship, they're recycling the last one, just with a different person. Because they don't love through presence, they loved through possession and reflection. And if you're still healing, still finding your footing, you may begin to compare yourself. You may spiral into questions like, are they treating this new person better? Have they truly changed? Did I walk away too soon from a better version of them? But don't be fooled. What you're seeing isn't love. It's a personal PR campaign, crafted to do 3 things. Make you question your worth. Love bomb the new person into submission. Convince the outside world they were never the villain. And eventually, just like clockwork, the new person will start to feel it. They'll sense the disconnect. They'll begin to realize the affection isn't deep, it's replicated. What they're receiving isn't real intimacy. It's manipulation dressed up as romance. Sooner or later, the mask slips. And what about you? You might still be hurting. You're free. You don't have to prove anything. You're not in some race to move on first, because those who truly move on don't need to prove it through someone else. 7. They try to make you feel guilty for leaving, even though they caused the pain. You walked away, not because you're cruel, but because you were empty. Empty from forgiving over and over, only to be dismissed. Empty from trying to communicate, only to be twisted. Empty because love became a burden and your kindness a tool to be used against you. And now, when fake affection no longer controls you, when your silence and emotional clarity throw them off, they turn to their oldest weapon, guilt. Not remorse, not responsibility. That a role reversal. They start planting thoughts like, what did I ever do to deserve this treatment? Would you throw everything away like that? I just needed one more chance, but you gave up on me. And if you're not grounded, you might start to feel bad. Start to wonder, was I too cold, too harsh, not forgiving enough? But pause for a moment. Ask yourself, who made you cry alone night after night? Who made you question your sanity? Who promised change and never followed through? They're not sad because they hurt you. They're angry because you won't accept the pain anymore. That's why they step into the victim role, telling a story that paints you as the one who abandoned them for no reason, while they were just a deeply hurt soul trying to love you. They might speak softly, the boat's broken, even bring up the past like it's proof of their deep love. But it's not to reconnect. It's a performance, one designed to make you feel bad just enough to come back. Because if they can't win you back with love, they'll settle for winning you back through guilt. Guilt destabilizes you. It makes you second-guess your decision. It makes you consider returning not because you love them, but because you feel like you have to make it right. But when you return from guilt, you come back voiceless. You re-enter the dynamic as the one who owes. Easier to manipulate, easier to control, easier to blame. But hear this, you don't owe them anything. You only owe yourself peace. You don't need to apologize for saving your own heart. You don't need to carry the weight of someone else's emotional consequences, especially when they caused your pain. You are not cruel. You are brave. You did what many are too afraid to do. You walked away from what hurt, even when your heart still cared. 8. They can't accept that you see through them because it destroys the illusion of power they cling to. To a narcissist, truth isn't what terrifies them most, it's being seen. Not the polished persona, not the carefully crafted social mask, but the real self underneath, empty, insecure, and filled with unhealed wounds. They know how to manipulate others' emotions, but they have no idea how to face their own. So they build an image, a false self, to hide the deep fear of not being loved, not being enough. When you loved them, you bought into that image. You tried to see the best in them, even when it hurt you. You forgave, you explained, you stayed. But then something shifted. You stopped seeing them with blind hope and started seeing with awareness. You noticed the repeated patterns. You saw through the empty promises. You realized you were loving an illusion, not a person capable of loving you back. And you stopped reacting. You stopped defending yourself. You stopped playing the emotional game. For most people, this would simply mark the end of a relationship. But for a narcissist, it triggers a full-blown ego crisis. Because now you see them. You're no longer manipulated by their stories. You're no longer charmed by their words. And that to them is more painful than rejection. Because when you see through them, you destroy the psychological structure they depend on to feel powerful. They're no longer the one in control. They're no longer the puppet master. They can't shrink you anymore just to feel big. All that's left is them, raw, immature, and exposed. And they hate you for that. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you saw the truth. You exposed the very thing they've spent their whole life running from. You walked away without begging. You didn't flinch. You didn't go back. From that moment, you stopped being the ex. You became a living threat to their fragile identity. Because if you could see through them, others might too. If you could break free, others might too. If you could thrive after them, their story becomes a lie. And that is their worst fear. The truth. And someone who's no longer afraid of it. There's a strange kind of freedom that comes the moment you stop caring. Not because you've grown cold, not because you've become heartless, but because you've simply grown too tired of fighting to be seen, to be heard, to be loved the right way. When you stop reacting, they panic. When you go silent, they unravel. When you walk away without the drama, without blaming, without playing the victim, you crack the foundation of their fake reality. Because they were never afraid of losing you. They were afraid of losing their power over you. They didn't mourn love. They mourned the control you once handed them. And when you stand there, calm, clear, unapologetic, not begging, not explaining, you become a narcissist's worst nightmare. Someone who was once broken but never destroyed. You don't have to scream that you've changed. The way you live, with peace, awareness and detachment, speaks louder than anything. And if you're on that journey, the journey of awakening after trauma, of reclaiming yourself, know this: you're not alone. We are here, we walk this path with you. And if this video speaks to your heart, if you saw yourself in every word, please hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join us on this path of healing through truth, through inner strength, and through the light of awareness. Because after everything you've been through, you don't just deserve to survive, you deserve to be free.